My town is home in the pleasantest sense of the word.
You walk into a grocery store at 7 in the morning. The fluorescent lights are already going out. The dairy aisle is a long, cold corridor of identical white jugs behind glass doors. 2% whole, oat, almond, organic, store brand, name brand, gallon, half gallon, quart. The options are almost aggressive in their abundance. You pull open the glass door, feel the refrigerated air press against your face, grab what you need, and keep moving. The whole transaction takes maybe 45 seconds. You do not speak to anyone. You do not know who produced what you are carrying. You will be home in 20 minutes. It is a perfectly efficient system. And it has made invisible something that was, for nearly a century, one of the most quietly essential relationships in American daily life. There was a time when you did not go and get your milk. Your milk came to you. Before first light. Glass bottles on a cold doorstep. A man who knew your name, knew your children's names, knew when something in your household had changed. Because the bottles told him so. That time is almost entirely gone now. And what went with it was more than a delivery service. It is a Tuesday morning in 1953. You are standing in your kitchen in Columbus, Ohio, or Akron, or Sacramento. It does not much matter where, because this morning is happening on nearly every residential street in America, simultaneously. You hear him before you see him. That particular sound of glass on glass, 2 or 3 bottles in a wire carrier, a sound so specific to this hour and this purpose that it exists nowhere else in your life. Your kitchen is still dark. The linoleum is cold through your socks. You can smell the previous night's coffee still faint in the percolator, and underneath it, the particular clean, cold smell that comes through the door when you crack it open. Morning air before anyone else has used it, cut with the faint sweetness of cream. The bottles on your stoop are cold enough to sting your fingers. You can already feel condensation forming on the glass in the doorway's warmer air. The milk inside is so fresh, it is still warm at the center. Bottled the previous evening, driven through the night, and here before your children are awake. You hold it up in the half light coming through the kitchen window. The cream has risen to the top, a thick yellow band sitting above the white, and if it is winter, it has pushed the cardboard cap up like a small white hat. You set the bottles in the refrigerator. You notice your neighbor's porch light is still on at 5:15 in the morning. You do not think much of it, but Frank, your milkman, will notice. He notices everything on this street. He has been noticing it for 11 years. Being a milkman was not a simple job dressed up in nostalgia. It was a skilled profession that required an almost architectural knowledge of human routine. Frank's morning began at 2 a.m. at the dairy plant, a Borden's regional facility, in this case, running 24 hours. The milk had been pasteurized, bottled, capped, and loaded onto refrigerated trucks by the time he arrived. His route was fixed but not rigid. He carried a small leather-covered ledger with every household's standing order: 2 quarts whole, 1 pint cream, butter on Fridays. But he was also expected to read the signals customers left him. An empty bottle with a note tucked under the cap meant a change in order. 2 empty bottles left out instead of 1 could mean the company was coming. No bottles left out at all for a customer who always left them. That was worth pausing for. The men who held these routes were, by almost any measure, remarkable memorizers. A veteran milkman in a mid-sized American city might have 150 to 200 customers on a single route. He knew their schedules, their preferences, and their children's ages. Many dairies formally trained their drivers to act as what the industry literature called route friends, the company's human face in each neighborhood. And they were trusted in a way that is almost impossible to imagine now. They moved through sleeping neighborhoods with keys to milk chutes built into the sides of houses. They entered attached garages. They placed bottles directly into refrigerators in some arrangements. They were inside the perimeter of private domestic life in the pre-dawn hours, and they were welcomed there. That trust had to be earned, and it was earned daily for years. By 1950, the American home delivery dairy industry was at the absolute summit of its power. Approximately 115,000 milkmen were working regular routes across the United States. Nearly a third of all milk consumed by American families arrived at the doorstep in glass bottles, rather than from any store. Companies like Borden's and Sealtest had built distribution networks of extraordinary precision, regional bottling plants feeding local routes, feeding individual homes, all timed to the rhythms of sleeping households. The glass bottle itself was a closed loop of elegant efficiency. You returned it. The dairy washed and sterilized it. It went back out. The average glass milk bottle made 17 trips before retirement. This was simply how milk worked. It was not remarkable. It was not quaint. It was infrastructure, like the postal service or the water line. Children in 1952 grew up understanding that milk appeared at the door the way mail appeared in the slot, because a specific person doing a specific job with specific skill made it happen before anyone was awake to witness it.
Farmer's milk. Each can is well cleaned before it is returned to the dairy farmer. Just before refilling the cans, the dairyman protects his milk supply.
The first crack appeared not with a single dramatic moment, but with a refrigerator and a parking lot. Through the late 1940s and into the 1950s, two things were happening simultaneously in American consumer life. Home refrigerators were becoming standard, not the small ice boxes of the pre-war years, but full-sized electric refrigerators with actual freezer compartments capable of storing a week's worth of food. And the American supermarket was exploding outward from city centers into the new suburbs, being built at a rate of 30,000 homes per month by 1950. The supermarket needed to sell milk, and it had a powerful advantage: volume. A chain grocery could sell milk at or below cost to bring customers through the door, a practice the industry called a loss leader. The home delivery dairy, operating with trucks and drivers and glass bottle logistics, could not come close to matching the price. The paper carton sealed the argument. Lightweight, disposable, and cheap to produce at scale, the waxed cardboard carton had existed since the 1930s, but became dominant at retail in the late 1940s. It needed no return trip. It had no deposit. It was simply thrown away. A concept that fit perfectly with the emerging American appetite for convenience and disposability. By the mid-1960s, home milk delivery had fallen below 15% of total milk consumption. By 1975, it was in the low single digits. Routes that had sustained families for 2 and 3 generations were quietly folded. The trucks were sold. The ledger books were closed. It happened quickly enough that most people did not notice it happening. What we lost when we lost the milkman was not in the end about milk. It was about a specific kind of knowing. Frank knew that the elderly widow on the corner had not put her bottles out since Thursday. He called it in. Someone went to check on her. That system, informal, human, built entirely out of daily presence and accumulated attention, did not get replaced when the route ended. It simply stopped. There is a small and telling detail buried in dairy industry records from the 1960s. As home delivery declined in urban neighborhoods, social welfare agencies in several cities noted a measurable increase in wellness check response times for elderly residents living alone. The milkman had been performing a social function no one had officially assigned him, and no one thought to replace him. We traded that for a savings of perhaps 30 cents per gallon, which is not to say the trade was made in bad faith. It was made the way most American trades are made, incrementally, in pursuit of reasonable convenience, with no single moment of decision anyone could point to later. But something was lost. A man who knew your name, knew your order, knew that something was wrong before you did. A relationship with the things that sustained you that was personal rather than transactional. The glass bottle has come back in some places, small local dairies, farmers' markets, subscription boxes. And there is something in that return that feels less like nostalgia and more like hunger. Do you remember a milkman? Maybe yours, maybe your grandparents'. Do you remember the sound of the bottles or the cold weight of one in your hand on a winter morning? Tell us that specific memory below.